While change itself is unpredictable, people's reactions to it are not. We all have basic human instincts for survival, and change threatens that instinct and triggers a predictable emotional journey. There are many. All right. So I just wanted to welcome everyone to our webinar series on mastering change, human stories, and smarter strategies. I'm Gabby Reppert, and I am the Strengthen Subcommittee Co-Chair in WIN and the Vice President of Continuous Management Institute. I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar, and this presentation is part of our spring webinar series for the Professional Development Committee. So before we get started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the US WIN YouTube channel. We'll also make this presentation available in the PD library once we're finished. During our webinar, please feel free to participate in the conversation via the chat feature. However, if you have any questions for the panelists and the interviewees to ask the panelists, please enter them in the Q&A feature of Zoom at the bottom. Our speakers will be answering questions during Q&A at the end of the webinar, and you can upvote others' questions to move them higher on the list if you feel like you really want to hear an answer to that question. So again, as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded, and we'll start with our webinar. So today we're exploring the human side of organizational change and what it takes to lead through it successfully. Change is rarely about process or plans, it's about people, trust, and leadership. As organizations navigate shifting priorities, evolving expectations, and complex challenges, effective change management can help keep people aligned and moving forward. So we'll share honest stories here, practical lessons, proven strategies for navigating organizational change in the nuclear industry today. And now onto our speakers. Tolman Whitler is a seasoned leadership development professional with over 20 years of experience. He specializes in behavioral assessments, human performance, and organizational culture transformation. For the past 17 years, he has played a key role in the turnaround and recovery of nuclear power plants, partnering closely with senior leaders, line management, and field personnel to drive measurable results. He created Continuous Management Institute and is the developer of SAM, a model to standardize management and develop processes across teams and sites. Next, we have John Z. Kandasamy, who is the Vice President of the nuclear company's Advanced Nuclear. She brings 35 years of industry experience and leadership in various positions, such as the Executive Director of DOE's Idaho National Laboratory Net Zero Program, leading INL to become a global model for achieving net zero emissions by 2031 through the development and implementation of carbon-free and carbon capture technologies. She is also the former Executive Vice President of Engineering for GE Hitachi, a past chair of US Women in Nuclear, and Global Executive Board member of WIN Global. In her free time, Jhansi is also the president and chairman of a college of sciences her father started in a rural part of India to educate underprivileged men and women. Next, we have Mingming Gardner, who is the founder of Talent Alchemy and a culture transformation trainer who helps teams turn their strengths into everyday habits that actually stick. She works closely with leaders, especially in the nuclear energy space, to re-energize their workforce and create environments where people feel energized, aligned, and excited about the mission. And I am Gabby Reppert, an organizational development consultant through Continuous Management Institute. My goal is to strengthen ops, leadership, and align their culture to strategic goals. My work is founded in the Systematic Approach to Management, or SAM, a model tested over 2 decades within the nuclear industry to cultivate accountability, alignment, and sustainable practices through all levels of management, which is embedded in our e-learning platform that I created. But with that, let's get started on this webinar. So the first thing that we'll be covering is change management, the what and the why. Why are we talking about change management today? The reason is that organizations or process changes are hard, and most people have a visceral reaction to it. So there are, however, many ways of managing change at any scale that can minimize churn and frustration. This is where a strong change management strategy is crucial. Every change must start with a clear strategic reason and a defined vision of an improved end state that is worth transitioning to. Defining the why of change is needed and how it will improve things, and it helps create a sense of urgency and aligns everyone towards a common goal. So on top of that, having dedicated, enthusiastic people in the forefront of any change can help convince people that the end state will be worth all of the effort in the end. And then we'll move on to the fundamental truths of change. And first, we must acknowledge that successful change is a path. It requires employees to be given a defined and simple picture of the end state. Next, it's not the change that's painful, it's the transition. A clear plan, effective communication, and meaningful support will help people make the transition with as little stress as possible. Our next fundamental truth, teams must plan for and act as if change will take time. Recognize that it will not happen overnight and there may be long, challenging roads to get there. But when we acknowledge that, employees feel ready and are ready to continue making that change effort happen. Also, change is historical. People's reactions to change is influenced by their past experiences with change. Going through any change effort is much like moving to a new house or starting a new job. It's difficult, but like I said, end state is worth it. And again, successful change requires visible champions to help others get through it. And it's one of the most crucial elements of a successful change effort. Moving on, and we're not going to get too deeply into change management process, but we just wanted to have a little basis for everyone so that we can move on to personal experiences and how those smart strategies can be applied. So some of the phases that you'll move through in the change management process are preparation, where a team assesses organizational readiness, identifies risks, and helps employees understand the need for change. Next, we go through the planning phase. In this stage, the team develops a strategy with clear goals, defined roles for leaders and change agents, and identifies performance indicators that will tell us whether or not we're on track throughout the entire change process. Implementation is the process of rolling out change while providing support, training, removing roadblocks, and celebrating short-term wins to maintain motivation. Next, we have our sustaining and reinforcing phase. It means, embedding new practices in the company culture to prevent employees from backsliding into old habits. And lastly, we'll have our review and analysis phase, evaluating the effectiveness of the change against original objectives and identifying lessons for future initiatives. So there are many resources available to obtain detailed maps of how to conduct successful change management campaigns. But during this presentation, we will be focusing on the human aspects of change management, and we'll bring some examples focusing on human elements, such as real world situations of what success may look like and what failure might look like. So as we move on, we will move on to the human side of change. So why do we think it is more important to talk about the human aspect rather than talking about steps, processes, and tools? Organizational change is only as successful as the ability and willingness of individuals to change their behavior and adopt to new ways of working. That can often be more difficult to achieve than rewriting processes or revising tools. So my first question now is to Tallman, and if as many as 70% of change efforts fail due to a lack of leadership, what specific leadership behaviors are most critical during periods of organizational change? And
Um,
yeah, there you
Good.
go. Just wanted to let you know you could turn on your thing. I'm gonna.
I'm okay. Yeah, it's one of the things that we don't really look at closely, and this is coming from my background in behavioral assessments, is the element of trust. And what is that? What's the impact of trust inside the organization when it comes to change management? And how receptive the audience is going to be to the changes if trust exists and or if trust does not exist. Now, I have been on both sides of this equation at a plant where there was trust in the organization. The organization management team had been fairly stable, and everybody recognized the need that needed to take place. So that trust element was there, which allowed the uh, changes that they wanted to make inside the organization a lot easier and more receptive to the employees that were in there. I've also been on the other side of the fence where trust did not exist, and for a variety of reasons. Um, some of it has been attrition ranks through the management group, and they have had many different attempts at trying to change with each management group that comes through. And I'm sure you've heard this term from IMPO before about the clay layer. How does that happen? And what's the effect on change management? They call it a clay layer because they say it's impenetrable. Well, it happens for a couple of reasons. Number one is that change in the management and no specific consistent message about what that change looks like. It changes by individual. And when they first try it, employees want to be the good employees and do what the bosses want in the organization. And so they give it a try. That manager leaves, gets replaced by another one. He brings in a different change. Again, they try to do the same thing. By the third, fourth, or fifth time, they finally start taking a look at it, going, we're doing a lot of changing, or we're doing a lot of changing, but there's not a lot of change in the organization. So they just kind of settle back and they just do it their way. Productivity takes a bit of a slide because they start doing what they're told to do rather than from a trust perspective where are engaged and take it upon themselves to move forward and move the organization forward. So trust is the piece that is missing a lot in a lot of the formal presentations that are done. And the avenue to be able to build that trust, I think we're going to deal with in a little bit in another couple of slides. But I wanted to bring this out just on the front end so we understand how important trust is from the employee to the supervisor or to the bosses. We understand how it is from the boss to the employee. And you have to be able to trust that employee if you're going to send them out to do work inside of a nuclear power plant. But again, the reverse trust is equally important for the organizations that want to make change or want to have stability and sustainability going forward. So we'll talk about more of that in some of the next slides.
Thank you. Great. All right, we'll go on to the next one. And we're talking more about the human side of change as well. And while change itself is unpredictable, people's reactions to it are not. We all have basic human instincts for survival, and change threatens that instinct and triggers a predictable emotional journey. There are many different ways to characterize human reaction to change. For example, the change curve model describes this emotional journey similarly to the stages of grief. The first stage, status quo, phase of denial toward the fact that familiar ways are actually changing. In the second stage, resistance, anger, and negative reactions surface as people begin to fear the unfamiliar. In the resignation stage, people begin to accept the reality that change is coming, whether they want it to or not. And in the emergence stage, folks start adapting to change and figuring out how to work in the new process or environment. And then comes evolving, where behaviors finally change and people permanently take on the new processes and ways of working. And finally, in the aftermath, people see the benefits of change and begin to grow from it. So, Tallman, another question for you is, what are some ways that you have gotten to see employees like on board with change? Like how have you seen employees get on board with change?
Generally, there's a marketing scheme out of New York many years ago, and it's called the oh shoot, now I'm going to sit here and struggle with the thought of the name of it. But it's how do you get ideas to spread? And what Apple did this many years ago. They marketed to a very small group of people actually that came to their initial meetings that were there for a 4 hour basic marketing sale of a new product that they were going to put out. Now they could have easily have just put that information out, but they understand the value of people who become engaged early in this and then take that information out and spread it to the rest of the world. It's the early adoption of Apple with their new phones, where people would go and wait in line for hours to buy a phone. But if they waited 2 weeks, they could just walk in and get one anyway. But the whole point of it for the people who are waiting is it's not about the product. It's about what it says about them. The fact that they wanted to be on the leading edge of the change, that they wanted to be dealing with the newest and most creative aspects and wanted to be associated with all of that. And that's also true when you start doing change inside an organization. I know myself, when I start to work inside the organization, there are people who will hear that message and it resonates in their head, and they decide that they want to be a part of it, and they start to come to you or to me and start asking me questions about more in depth of what it is that this change is, what it means, and what it will do for the organization and them in particular. And then when they find that it aligns with who they are as individuals, then we find them going out and starting to talk to the rest of the organization about that change, which then makes my path as a change agent a lot easier because I already have somebody out there that understands it, is more than willing to talk about it, has been experiencing it, and can relate all of that to the rest of the employees. It just makes the effort of change management a lot easier. You don't have to try to change everybody. That's a very time consuming and it's an exhaustive process. But if you can find those change agents inside the organization, and like I said, they will usually come to you once they get involved in it, then the process becomes a lot easier. You deal with them and let them deal with the rest of the organization, of whom they are very familiar with, and the people inside the organization are familiar with as well. So it just makes the process a lot easier on everybody, and it makes it more engaging and inclusive. That help?
Yes, definitely. And we'll be talking more about visible change champions as we move through our PowerPoint slides as well. But I think the video you're talking about is diffusion of innovation. Maybe it's that. I can't quite remember the exact name. But anyway, as we move through, we are going to be talking also more about the role of trust and empathy within change management. And before we talk about empathy, it's worth recognizing that people are far more likely to feel heard, supported, and open to change when a strong foundation of confidence and credibility already exists. That foundation shapes whether employees believe leadership understands their concerns and has their best interest in mind. So, in many ways, that is what allows empathy to have real impact during change. So, um, Tallman, what needs to exist at a site before empathy can happen?
Well, we addressed a little bit of it early on, and that is the trust element and trust aspect. As was talked about earlier in some of the resistance features when it comes to change, I mean, change is the unknown. And if two people are walking into the unknown together, then you have a whole lot of unknown, and that creates a lot of fear inside the individuals. It helps when you have somebody who is trusted. And this is something that I find that there are issues with inside organizations. Now, it could be because attrition rates are so high and there's a lot of turnover that's currently going on inside the industry, and they haven't had the time to be able to do it. Maybe it's just not one of those items that's high on everybody's list. I mean, I'm your boss. You're supposed to trust me automatically. Here's your orders, go do. And they may do that, but they may not do that to the fullest extent as if they were engaged. I can give you a prime example of somebody who would be an individual that you would trust. And I'm sure all of you that are listening to this webinar have had somebody in your past who took the time and the energy to support you and develop you. You can name that individual right off the top of your head of who they were. But the fact of the matter is, they may have spanked you when you didn't do good, but they praised you when you also did well. And they were there to guide you and produce the best you that could be because they saw something in you. And that's something that we see that's kind of lacking in today in the change management process. Where are those individuals who are doing that development? I know everybody's got a mentor. It's a question of Is that a mentor appointed, or are they there because they want to be there to guide you and direct you? And are they in a position where they can observe you in the process of doing that and then provide you with that feedback at the same time? So that feedback then becomes the learning loop for you. So without it, I mean, you'll listen to people, you'll hear what they have to say, but are you actually going to trust them when you go back? I'll give you an example. Um, I was at a plant and they decided to do the traditional rollout, brought in all the SLT. Everybody had a speech that they were supposed to be able to do. Site vice president had a speech. They put up a circus tent, believe it or not, air conditioned, chairs and everything. And they literally brought everybody on the site to introduce it. I mean, they did this the right way. And then everybody was sitting there. They did the presentation. Of course, this was also about the fifth presentation that they've been through in the past 3 years. Everybody was all excited and very happy. Like I said, there was a lot of speeches that were done explaining what the new change was going to be and what the expectation was for the organization. But nobody talked to any of the individuals separately. It was done in a group fashion. All right, we gave you the message. You're supposed to understand it. Go out and do it. And the trust factor wasn't developed between the employees and their supervisors and their managers. And so consequently, some of the stories that I heard afterwards was, hey, this is great. We're getting a half day off with pay. And that's about as much as the change was actually occurring. My advice was at that point in time was, you supervisors, you need to sit down with these employees. You need to be able to explain to them how their job is going to interact with this change. Are there going to be any changes to the specific job that these individuals are doing that they need to start taking a look at? And then then the supervisors have to do the observation and provide the feedback in order to build that trust with the employee. And it has to be done in a certain way, which is where that empathy gets created then. And the empathy is very important. You need to be able to pat that employee on the back and say, hey, listen, what? You did a really good job there. That was fantastic what you just did. I want you to keep that up. I have a video called Pet the Puppy. And I'm not saying that humans are dogs, so don't get me wrong. But behavior is behavior. And when you call a little puppy over to you and he comes, do you kick him? I think everybody's going to understand the answer to that is no. And why would you? What happens if you kick him? There's a high probability that that dog is not going to come to you if you call him in the future because he doesn't know what you're going to do with him. So what we do with the dog is when he comes over, what do we pet him? We give him a joyful response so that he understands that that's the right thing to do. And if he does it more frequently, he's going to get more of it. And humans are virtually no different when it comes to observations and and work that's being done that meets the objectives of the organization through the change process. So
Yeah.
I hope you all understand that little piece and don't think I'm saying that humans are dogs because that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is behavior, and we have to
Mhm.
pay attention.
Definitely. Yes. And you answered my question about the rest of empathy as well, completely covered. So we'll be moving forward to enabling successful change. So before you can begin planning a major change, assess whether the organization is ready for the change. So in a training presentation given by Scott Motz on change management, he refers to this as assessing the will, the skill, and the hill. Fun words to be using. So find out what the current attitudes are towards change and know what the barriers are that the organization must overcome to be able to be successful to make that change. And then evaluate whether employees have the skill level required for the coming changes and evaluate the hill or whether the organization has the capacity to take on more work that comes with the transition. People who are already overwhelmed can't always make a step towards change in the middle of trying to keep up with everything else going on. So it's crucial to communicate the strategy and the reasons for the change effectively to those people. And so we'll move on from this slide. We'll move past. And then I wanted to take us into the planning, cornerstone of all success. So, for any change effort, it is critical to develop a clear strategy with clear goals and a specific, well defined end state that has visible advantages over the current state. So, then as you plan the change process, create concrete daily actions that will stabilize the situation and help people see incremental gains. Some of the crucial enablers in this process start with, identifying change champions, informal leaders or early adopters who can act as ambassadors and help socialize the change among peers, which is, something we touched on a little bit earlier. These can be the folks that perform the initial smaller scale trial runs of the proposed end state, as well as local subject matter experts, people who are interested, people who want to see the change actually happen in their organization and who are willing to take that step forward before the rest of the population of your organization. So, my next question is, Tallman, successful change rarely happens because of one leader alone. So, who are the critical people that you've seen leaders bring on board early? Both formal leaders and informal influencers, and how did they work together to guide the organization through change?
I will say that I've been in dealing with operations and ops leadership and operational focus inside the nuclear power plants for quite a while. One of the groups that I go to are the ones that actually um, need that strategy to be able to deal with the organization because they're the ones that are responsible for it, and those are generally the shift managers. And once they, again, I'm going to back up. I don't want to train everybody on the site. What I want to do is train those that have the opportunity to train everybody else. And the shift managers are the ones that are able to do that the easiest, just simply because they have the license to do it. There's virtually nothing that goes on inside a nuclear power plant that they don't sign off on. And if they don't sign off on it, it doesn't get done. So from a culture change standpoint, the easiest way to implement this is to deal with the shift managers and find out what it is that they want out of the organization, and then use the power of the signature to be able to make that change happen. Because when an SM rejects something that comes into the office, some work package or whatever the case may be, obviously maintenance, INC, whoever, mechanical, has to go back to their organization and say, "Hey, shift manager didn't accept this. Now what do we do?" They have to then put their heads together and come up with something that the shift manager will accept. And in that process, what they do is they actually step change the culture of the organization very simply and very easily without having to go through the entire process of the change management exhibition. I've seen that done many, many times. It's very effective. Every time they make that change, it creates a new standard for the organization. The other thing is that supervisors need to be able to engage the employees and empower them in that process. And I alluded to this earlier as well. When a supervisor sits down and goes through what the roles are with an employee, and the employee also brings their share of what they believe to be the role, the task and execution pieces of their job. And when those two individuals get together and they come to an agreement on what that employee's job is, you have automatic accountability. The other beautiful thing is if you have a performance evaluation form to where you can actually, as a manager, observe that employee in the process of doing his job, we know where he's at in his own development. Higher than that is the supervisor can look into that same performance approach and understand are the items that they have chosen for the task of that supervisor, are they the right ones that meet what the organizational change is looking for? So now you've got multiple checks and balances in the process to become successful in this. And once that all starts to work, and it's an integrated process, then you start getting the reviews from your info evaluations coming back saying, "Ooh, your operations group has definitely made a step up, and the organization is following it." Does that help you with this?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that, bringing critical people into your change management process will really, engage the whole organization, will really influence them. And I see that through what you were saying with the shift managers or with other visible leader change champions that we are talking about. So that was great. Thank you. And we'll move on to our next topic, which is implementation, our next and final topic for us. So, one of the critical steps in implementing change is to create training and support resources to ensure that employees have the skills, knowledge, and tools to adapt to a new process or technology. Provide employees with access to local champions, which is what we're talking about, who are easily accessible to answer these questions. These champions also provide a safe space for employees to voice concerns, encourage people who have strong views on the change to become part of the solution, to become invested in the change, and help others get excited for new changes to come. So, and now we'll also view pushback as feedback. We're always trying to gain insight from our employees and how they view change, how they feel about it, and we need to treat it as valuable data. It can highlight gaps in the process that the change team might have missed, continuously collect feedback and adjust the strategy to make sure that the implementation stays on track is something that we can also be doing. So we need to also be ready to celebrate short-term wins by setting small and achievable milestones. That's also a great strategy to ensure that change will keep taking place the way we want it to. And it should be recognizable publicly. So this will help build momentum as positive impacts are kept visible, which will help combat frustration and change fatigue, as we have seen in plenty of our companies and organizations. So, Tallman, what are some ways that you've seen sustainability achieved from a successful change management plan?
Well, there are two things that are required, and that is consistency and continuity. If you don't have those, then unfortunately you don't have sustainability. So what I am seeing now from organizations that are becoming successful is that I mean, we do a lot of turnover inside the management ranks in nuclear power plants, and we do this for a really good reason. We're trying to spread ops logic and thinking throughout the rest of the organization. We're trying to build bench strength for the future. So I understand the need for that. But as the individual gets promoted out and you have a hole in the management ranks where you hire somebody new to come in, what are we doing to support that individual so that he can continue to support the organization in their efforts to maintain this change process? And the fact of the matter is, a lot of times that doesn't happen inside these organizations. So when you start getting out two or three generations of change outs in your management team, the original concept of the change starts to dissipate and everything goes back to the way it used to be or the easiest way. And you lose that consistency and continuity inside the organization. So from an implementation standpoint, I just got a text, an email actually, from a shift manager at a plant that I was just at. And his recommendation to senior leadership was that all new shift managers coming into the organization now have to go through the same process that they did. And so, from a sustainability, for the implementation process, my recommendation is that you do continue to train people in this change process until there's a new change that has to come down the pike. Does that help you with that?
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much. And thank you for talking through us with these, technical aspects, behavioral aspects of change management. And it was just so great to hear from you from all of that. And now we will be moving on to our next section of our webinar, which, as mentioned earlier in the last stage of change management campaign, is review and analysis, where change team evaluates the effectiveness of change against the original objectives and identifies lessons learned for future initiatives. And so today, now we're going to be moving into analysis review with John C., who we have the pleasure of speaking to today, who's been in the industry in various leadership roles. John C. has some great stories of her own from extensive experiences within these organizations and going through these change efforts. And with the help of my co-presenter, Ming Ming, I will turn my camera off and Ming Ming will talk to John C. and share some of these awesome stories with us today. So thank you for being here, Min Min. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Here. Thank you so much, Gabby. I am so excited. Thank you so much, Tallman, for all of that insight. I thought that was incredible information. And I'm so excited for all the participants here today. We've got 111 participants. Isn't that like an angel number, 111? I think that's a good sign, John C. What do you think?
Completely agree. Yes.
So I actually would love to start with just a quick story about how John C. and I met. It was a few years ago. I was on a mission to connecting with leaders at the INL, which is where John C. was at the time. We lived in good old Idaho Falls, Idaho. Does anybody actually know where that is? It is not Ohio. It is not Iowa. It is Idaho. Yes, and both of us were living in Idaho. So one day I was walking out of a restaurant. One of the general manager of Curtis Wright, who had hired me to train her team, she stopped me and she said, "You've got to meet my friend, John C." So she introduced me, and within just a few minutes, when John C. heard what I do, she looked at me and said, "I've been looking for you." And then I looked up at the universe and I'm thinking, wow, thank you so much for meeting me halfway, universe, halfway in my hustle. And at the time, John C. was leading a major mission at the INL, and she brought me in to help her team use their strengths to move that mission forward. And I'll tell you, John C. is the real deal. Okay, if anybody knows John C., you know that about John C. She doesn't just lead work, she invests so deeply in her people, and she creates the kind of environment where people can truly thrive. So that's the kind of leadership that drives real change. And so I'm really excited for this conversation. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to John C. I'm a clapper. I'm also a hugger. Sorry, we're not in person. Um, but John C., first question. Could you please take us back to a moment earlier in your leadership journey? Um, what was a change that you were leading? And like maybe how did it feel harder than you expected?
Yeah. Thanks. First, I want to say thanks for that really wonderful intro. It was two asteroids colliding. It really was. And I think
Ooh.
we're both the same person a lot of times. I think you can probably see in our strengths that there are some of them that are the same. But yeah, thank you for that. And Tom, and I would say a lot of the things you said as far as change management really resonates. And so thank you for doing that. It actually set the stage for it. So, Mingmen, to answer your question, there's probably, so I've worked at 5 different nuclear power plants, 7 different companies, probably more. Pico becoming Exelon, it's 2, but we'll count that as 1. And I've probably had about maybe a dozen or more jobs. So in my 40 years, believe it or not, in my professional career, so much change, so many different opportunities to be a leader, either as an individual contributor or a manager. Like, so there's a difference between being a manager and being a leader and clearly understanding what that is. I will tell you, I think one of the biggest, from a change management as well as the leadership opportunity kind of raising up to the top is when Exelon um, took over Oyster Creek. So it was Amergen was the company that British Energy had actually owned Oyster Creek, and Exelon came in. What a huge opportunity for change management. At that time, they had asked me to go be the reg affairs manager. That's working with the NRC. The power plant was going through license renewal. It was operating, it was one of the oldest plants in the country, 40 years, and we were doing another extension for 20 years. Struggles with the NRC, the state, New Jersey. If anybody has lived in New Jersey or has traveled through New Jersey, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's a different country in the United States. And so when I was sent over there to be the reg affairs manager and work through that, um, you have not just the internal employees that are dealing with this takeover. It's a takeover. Exelon has come to take us over. We have our procedures. We know how to work. What the heck? Like, why are you guys coming in? The big boss coming in to take over and like driving it down our throat when all is well, right? So that
Mm,
culture that's there and being directed to kind of, we're going to change our procedures. We're going to do it the Exelon way. The reason it needs to be the Exelon way is, which I do believe in that when it's uniform and it's standard, and everybody's following and using the same procedures and processes, then it really does make it easy from going to plant as an Exelon, and everybody basically works to the same, sheet of notes, if you will. And it was a moment of I will tell you, if I knew what I know now, if I did back then, we would have minimized a lot of the crying in the bathroom. I gotta go do this, or the employees not being on board.
mm,
And really, it's like, oh, you guys are just gonna come over and take us over, and we're gonna go do this, um, and then the state of New Jersey, the commissioners coming in, and really the external forces during this change management really had to, one, understand the employees, make sure you are their champion, you are listening to them. Talman mentioned about the credibility and the trust, right? So Exelon comes in, there isn't a lot of trust as a company. So, but as a leader, making sure that you are a credible, trustworthy leader and a partner and a colleague to help through that transition when emotions are high, when everything is tense, when there's so much pressure of, how to go through that. For me, I think it was understanding the people and understanding the people as individuals and what their contributions are. And then being able to communicate, one of my bigger strengths is communications. Being able to communicate it in a way how it relates to me. I think a lot of times managers, what they don't do, which is what makes it hard, is that it's them. They told me to go do this.
mm,
Not, I believe in what we're going to do and how that aligns with the company mission, is making the employees understand. So I have a group. I want to make sure my employees are clear and I'm bought into that, where we're going with the mission of the company and why we're becoming part of the huge Exelon fleet. So I think like I said, there was a lot of crying in the bathroom going on, and it's mostly from the emotions of working with people feeling like, okay, they're going to cut my job.
mm,
They're going to replace me. Or I got to now learn a new process. I'm like 60 years old and I have to learn to do a new procedure, a new process. So I think that was probably the most impactful moment in my career where the entire plant is going through the change and they all have different issues and emotions. And you also have external forces coming in. Um, but being strong, making sure people trust you, building that credibility to say, I am on your side, but I'm also on the company side. And how do I translate what the company wants to do and what your role is in where we need to go? It wasn't easy, and it's not like, it's wonderful and everything. There were people that left. There were people that we had to displace. So that people aspect of it is so difficult, as Talman mentioned about the empathy piece.
Mm,
You have to have the empathy. And, you and I've talked about this before. My top is activator, and I'm also positive, but my positivity can lead people to think I'm not real.
mm,
So going through that process and going through that change management and realizing I can't always be positive, but the positivity is how I'm displaying that positivity so that people think, you are credible, and you're not always la la la, let's go cheerleaders, let's go, 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 go. There's some of that from a positivity. I think there's also that negative connotation that comes with it when you don't seem real.
absolutely. And I'm really glad that you spoke to that too, because I have seen that so much in you when like your team members are like, talking about, hey, this is hard, this change is hard, like I'm scared, for my job, I don't know if I'm going to be needed. And for you to be able to have the resilience, because that's truly how I see your positivity playing out, is that you are resilient in the face of change and being able to empathize with your people. I've seen that in you, and it makes a massive difference. And I love how you're talking about really focusing on the people as you're managing and leading change. So thank you so much for that. I think you also kind of spoke to our next question, which was truly looking back. I just love like what's one thing that you realize that you may not have understood about people or change at that time that you wish you knew now,
Yeah,
or that you maybe already know now that you wish you knew before?
yeah, yeah. And I think if I had known about people, there's an inherent fear, right? If there's a change happening, or you have a new leader, or you have a new manager, or you're moving to a new job. For me personally, we were moving, my kids were going into high school, there was all of these, their sporting activities, and being able to balance the home life, I think helps in my case to understand what my employees might be going through. There's a place outside of work, and how that could influence their work, and having that myself, the human nature of the employees are real people, and they're here to collect a paycheck, but also we need them to be passionate and energetic and working towards earning that paycheck, to drive the mission of the company, right? So you join the company, you've been asked to, you have a particular role in the company, you have to deliver in whatever your job is in the company. And I think as a leader or a manager, understanding the needs of the employee, and as an employee, need understanding what your role is and how you're going forward. And I'm going to keep this one of the same in the example of the Oyster Creek generating station. I was asked to be the chemistry manager. And the funny story is I was the reg affairs manager having a conversation with my site vice president, and that chemistry department had gone through 8 managers in 5 years.
Oh, wow.
They were broken. They were at the bottom of the fleet. The Exelon, they measure all of the plants, how they perform, the different organizations. They were below the bottom of the fleet, and so for them, as individuals, as people, they were already like not valued. Their work wasn't valued. So they're like, I'm just going to go through the motions. And I happened to have a conversation with my boss at the time, and Tim Roush. I think he just retired from TVA. Love him. He basically, we're having this conversation, and I said, if I was a chemistry manager, this is what I would do. Well, a week later, I became the chemistry manager. He's like, go. I said, I know nothing about chemistry. He goes, it's okay. We don't need you to know anything about chemistry because you got all these PhDs. They're going to take care of work. You just need to go get them motivated, inspired, and lead them so that they are valued. So you have to not only work with them, but you also have to work with the shift managers in the control room. You got to work with the maintenance and operations and everybody else. So being the bridge is one, understanding what are these people going through with that change and having a different manager. And I remember going for a walk with one of them at night. And this is all about the connections that you need to make with the people. Going out on a sampling visit at 2 o'clock in the morning. And, one of the technicians telling me, well, how long are you going to be here? Who's going to be the next manager? So they've already kind of resigned themselves to the fact that she's going to be here, stamp her card, and then off she's going to go. Um, and I think, just to kind of go back to that's kind of like for me, an opportunity to understand the people that are working and understanding what their needs are and why are they where they are. Is it just about connecting the paper paycheck, or do they really enjoy waking up in the morning and running in, can't wait to go to work, that kind of a mentality. So understanding that whole experience really kind of helped me kind of rethink my management skills and my leadership skills and how do we get everybody moving in that direction. Again, not an easy thing. There are people that are just like don't want to do anything, and it's cracking that nut, if you will, being able to kind of get them on board. It's not easy. It's a lot of work.
Well, I have to say, they are very lucky to have had you at that time because you are the subject matter expert when it comes to people and helping people. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of leaders actually avoid having those types of conversations with their people about what do you actually really need to thrive here at work?
Yeah,
What are you possibly going through in
yeah,
your personal life that might be affecting your work here and what's happening at work here that might be affecting you in your personal life, right? Because change is inevitable, but it's still hard. And so I hope they know how lucky they were to have you during that time. I just want to mention we have this awesome question that's coming in that came in, and we're going to make sure that we answer that in the Q&A that's going to be coming in just a little bit. It's about how do you actually deal with hostility? But we're going to get to that, Kate, at the very end during the Q&A because
in the bathroom. I
very
could talk.
I'll be very excited about that. Um, my next question for you, John C, is if you had known your strengths back then, how would you have approached that particular situation differently?
Um, yeah, I think so. Like I said, by the way, that team, the chemistry department, like I said, they weren't even on the bottom. They actually became number two in a year and a half and became number one as I was leaving. So it worked. Whatever it was, it worked. And I think if I knew what I knew then, what I knew now, that what I knew then was, like positivity. I mentioned earlier, I'm typically a glass half full person. I always like to see the positive things of everything. Um, on their side, they're like, here she is, we don't need another cheerleader to come in here and kind of tell us what to do. Like, is she real? Is she
Mm,
credible? Is she know what she's talking about? She's not technically savvy. What the heck? Like, who the heck gave her an electrical engineering degree? You know? So, because I went in strong as an activator. I mean, I went in strong, like you know me, right? Like I know
yes.
I'm the bulldog.
Just to give a little bit of context to that activators, what they bring is energy and instant momentum to projects and groups and an endless energy to get things done. Like John C and I totally get that about each other because we share that as our number one strength. But what they also need is freedom to make decisions and to execute,
Yeah,
right? Because we
yeah,
can't wait for consensus. It's
that's
like,
right.
this is how I'm going to deal with it, and don't stop me because I know how to do this, and just let me do it. Um,
Yeah, but I
so
think,
yeah.
yeah, I think though for that group, yeah, they need a little bit of activator, but I think the woo part and then the futuristic part, I think I could have had a better play at that to be able to say, here's what your future looks like. Here's what I see. The future for this organization, the value that you bring is going to be recognized. They're going to listen to you when you call them up and say, hey, I see a trend. This leak, if we're not going to take care of it in the next week, we're shutting the plant down. You know,
Mm,
that value that they bring, I think I could have probably uh, used those strengths to communicate to all the parties. So I'm a strong communicator, but I don't think I communicated the values. If I had known and if I was more deliberate using my strengths back then, I think that could have been from an activator, it shouldn't come across as being very directive. You know,
mm,
like, I know what I want to do. We know we're going to go fix this thing. Let's go fix it. Let go. And I think I would have been more deliberate knowing my strengths and using them to the maximum capabilities in turning that organization without a lot of stressful anxiety.
mm, mm. Yes, all of this so good. I'd love to know, John C., what's one shift you made as a leader that dramatically improved how your team experienced change?
Yeah, I would this is a true marketing answer I'm going to tell right now, which is, when I was at INL, my action, my job was to transition this 890 square mile, 6,000 employee lab to net zero in 10 years.
Mm,
The
wow.
lab director made an announcement a year before I got there. And when I went in, I said, didn't you say 10 years? He said, no. I said, 2031. You got 9 years. Go make it happen. Um, and for me, I've done a lot of these different types of behavioral understanding your capabilities and your strengths, like Myers-Briggs and all of that. But I would say meeting you, and I truly, truly, truly mean this, having you come and do the strengths finders, not just go on the computer and let's just fill out these answers to these questions. It's following back up with my team. So we have 6,000 employees that need to do this. I only have 12 that are going to lead this effort to go make it happen. So having the 12 understand their strengths and their areas of opportunities and being able to, in my desk, I have all of their strengths. How do they like to be rewarded? How do they like to be recognized? And then extending that to my peers. Remember we had people singing karaoke that I would never thought would have stood and talked to anybody, actually singing and being able to kind of um, really get in the moment because we were all in it together and we were
Mm,
going to do this together and identifying leads for each of those areas we needed to transition to net zero. So we created a plan. We created the plan with the strengths of each of these individuals. What are they passionate about? What do they want to drive? And then recognizing them by doing YouTube videos. Actually, you guys can go if you want to Google INL, some of the activities we did in Net Zero, they're actually in YouTube. It's a form of recognition, right? So you understand their strengths, you understand how they want to be rewarded, and then celebrating the success. I would say that was probably my um, leadership change in how to execute going forward. So I think that probably I might have employed some of those things in my past unknowingly,
hmm.
but I think the shift is doing it knowingly and understanding myself and being able to implement it with my strengths and my areas of opportunities, understanding my employees, their strengths, and each of them, the peers understand. Because I mean, we did that as a team building session. And, every morning somebody'd say, "Oh, you're a great communicator. I think you should go do this." Or giving each other cards saying, "I saw you do this." And I think that shifted the whole dynamic of my team. And they were really great going out and making things happen. We were making things happen like that, not 2 years from now, not 5 years from now. We're not going to wait till 2031. They were happening in the moment. We were 75% there by year 3.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
because of everybody just kind of like really being into it.
Oh, that's so amazing. I loved hearing all of this, and I just remember having this conversation with your team. Like, you knew your team as a group and you knew them individually because you had the data. Like, you literally
Yeah.
had the data in hand that showed you, hey, this is actually what we bring as a team. And I remember the excitement from your team as you guys were going through some major changes and trying to implement new things. And their top strength as a team was learner. And as with learner, your team brought a learning perspective. You needed exposure to new information and experiences. And for sure, you guys were going through so many new learning experiences. And then what you're motivated by was to live on the frontier or the cutting edge. And
Yeah.
I think when they heard that, they were like, oh my gosh, we are uniquely positioned and talented to do this work. I remember the energy in the room shifted, and I remember you delegating different tasks to different people based on what it is that they brought to the table and what it is that they needed to truly thrive. And so,
Yeah.
oh, thank you so much for that. I have one last question for you, John C. For leaders who are in the middle of change right now and feeling the pressure, what advice would you give them based on your experiences?
Um, I think one understanding, do you have alignment in your organization, employees, or even if headquarters is giving the mission, is everybody aligned on the mission? That's one of the first thing to make sure that everybody understands their role, how they fit in the big picture to achieve that mission. Like as individuals, we have a role. Do they clearly understand what their role is in the big picture? Was it a 3-year goal, 5-year goal, 10-year goal, or the ultimate mission of where it needs to be? I think understanding the strengths of the people, I think is really, really good. Knowing now, I think when you're under pressure, before you're in pressure, take time ahead of that time. So this should be a normal operation. So when you're in the pressure, in the pressure cooker, everybody knows what their jobs are. You know what turns them on, what turns them off, as whether you're their manager or their leader, or the peers know each other's. So you're all going to work together so that pressure is not so high as if you didn't walk in as one unit. So I think one, being aligned, making sure there's alignment up and down across the board, making sure there's enough support from other organizations that understand what the work is that you do, making sure your employees know where they fit in the big picture and what their contributions are. And then one being their voice and also being their ear for when they're providing input. But a lot of that work needs to happen ahead of time so you are a cohesive team. And I realize that you'll find out the people's strengths in the moment, but is that the time you want to be understanding it, or do you want to be deliberate so that that time that you're there when it's so critical and you're in this hot seat, everybody knows their role and they're off and running and being able to make it so it lessens the burden on everybody and not one or two people. So I think understand your strengths. I would say I think that helps. Understand your vulnerabilities. Make sure that you do that. And I think Mingmin is a great. I would say if you're going to go do these Clifton Strengths Finders, you absolutely need to have a team building session that comes back and reviews it together, not just I did it on paper and forget about it. You need to continuously keep using it. Um, so I think that would probably be my biggest thing is understand the strengths, be aligned, know your role in achieving the big picture for the company, your organization, your team, and moving forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, John C. Thank you so much. Okay, now we get to move into Q&A. So stick with us, John C. We're going to bring Tallman back on. And we're going to go through some of these amazing questions that we've got here. So let me run through. I just really loved this one that Juliana actually sent to us. Okay, here's a question. And John C. or Tallman, you guys can just chime in if you have some insight on this. But how do you deal with outright hostility as you're bringing change, especially when you're bringing the change as the incoming company? Um, yeah, who's got insight on that? How do you deal with outright hostility? Yes, Tallman.
I I was at a plant and I was going to go see the assistant operations manager shift. And I remember walking into his office and he was sitting there looking at me and his head was cocked over and he was just doing this little nod. And he said, I just got one thing to tell you. I don't like you. That was our conversation. And I'm assigned to help ops. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? Thank you. I appreciate that. At least I know when you stab me, I'm going to see the dagger going in my chest. It's not coming in my back.
Oh.
And so he looked at me and he went, well, I wasn't expecting that. And I thought, well, guess what? That's important because I want to know what it is that you're upset about so that I can deal with it with you and figure out what the answer needs to be for the organization going forward. Said, I'm not here to make your life harder. I'm here to make your life easier and better, and the organization as well. And from that time forward, let's see, he's been promoted twice now. And the last two times he called me about should he take the job or should he not take the job. So from that moment, that one little interaction that we had and the honesty that was put forth in there, it's carried over to a pretty good friendship to this day. I respect him, he respects me, and we did some really wonderful things at the institution that he was at and got his organization out of a lot of trouble and back and performing highly. So that's my little story.
Common, thank you. And I think there's a common thread that's happening in these conversations is we need to be focusing on the people, right? Like having these relational conversations where we actually come to understand them. And we say crazy things like, well, if you're going to stab me, I know you're going to stab me from the front and not behind at least, this is good.
Yeah, I,
Disarming. That's very disarming from the beginning.
yeah, well, I had to. It was just at the time. I mean, he needed to be involved in the change. He was important. He was
Yeah.
well respected in the organization. Without his approval or acceptance, my guess the change would not have happened anywhere near the level that it needed to. And so to get him on board was an important item. I also will tell you that whenever I go to a site, I do 3 psychometric instruments that I have been using since the 1980s. And I'm looking at preferences, needs, and motivations. I want to know the people that I'm dealing with, how is it going to be when they try to implement the change? Where are they going to have difficulties doing that so we can head that process off before they actually get into it?
Mm, that's fantastic. John C.
Yeah, I
Let's hear about how
probably,
you dealt with outright hostility.
oh my God, several. But I will tell you, this is kind of like maybe a touchy subject as well. I know I had an employee that was going through gender change. Amazing, amazing, amazing worker. Works like crazy, puts in extra time, amazing quality work. And when they were going through the change, they came and talked to me about it. And, it was a very emotional, right? Emotional for this individual because their peers didn't know how the peers were going to react. What I was surprised with was the peers were great. They were like, this is fine, you're still one of us. What was surprising was a maintenance manager coming to me and telling me, you better not put that person on any of my jobs. And before it would be like, oh, this is great. But they were like, you know what? I don't believe in that. Lots of colorful language and words saying you will not assign that person. If you do, I'm going to just reschedule or I'm going to do something else, but you better not do it. Came in my office, closed the door, and is yelling at me saying, how can you let this happen? And this person shouldn't be working here. I said, that's your personal belief, whatever it is you believe. I have work to get done. The assignments will go as they need to go. And if you have a problem with it, you can go to HR and have a conversation, but you need to like stop bringing your personal opinion and judgment on this. Think of them as they're doing their job and that's it. And I am not going to do any special assignments because you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I said, come talk to me. You can take the day off when that person is working, but I am not going to change this. So it was having that heart to heart. I mean, there was a lot of words exchanged but I was not going to back down and I was not going to let this person kind of, and very, very nasty.
Mm,
I'm gonna, I'm sorry, what was that?
that is some real hostility. Oh,
Yeah. It's not healthy, it's not helpful, it's not, and they're a manager. They're a manager coming in and doing that. And it's just, but I mean, the company has procedures, they have ways of handling it. We've had team meetings for this individual to feel comfortable and their peers to feel comfortable, working together and being in the break rooms and things like that. But that was unexpected from somebody who I thought highly of to come in and try to pressure that. So yeah.
well, thank heavens you have such great communication skills that you could have that crucial conversation. I think some people might have skirted around that or just said, hey, don't talk to me, talk to HR, right? Don't even talk to me about. So that is really a challenging thing. And it's interesting as leaders, the challenges that get thrown away, right? Like some of this stuff you can't even make up. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't even make this ish up. Anyways, okay, we're gonna move on to the next question here. Thank you for those pieces of insight, Tallman and John C. Um, okay, the next question was from Samantha Weaver. She said, "How did you identify your top five strengths? Was there a specific seminar or book that you read?" So guess what, Samantha? I hope that you and everybody here on this webinar is actually going to be attending the WIN conference this year because one of the things that everybody has the opportunity to do is actually take the Clifton Strengths Assessment. So as part of your registration, you're also going to receive a link in the near future to actually take the Clifton Strengths Assessment. The actual results themselves will come in a PDF format and you can read through them. The real value in it is how do I actually use them in my everyday life? How do I actually create a habit where I take the strengths and apply it to my everyday work so that I can truly enjoy a high quality of life, so that I can truly thrive at work, that I can bring my best. I understand what I need in order to do my best. So we're actually doing the professional development workshop on the last day of the conference. Seats are limited. So if you're going to register, I would say register as soon as you possibly can and reserve a seat because you're going to actually have your own personalized, customized plan on how to actually use your strengths in your everyday work. And so we're really excited about that. So stay tuned. And if for whatever reason you cannot make it to the WIN conference, you can still take the Clifton Strengths Assessment. We highly recommend it to know your strengths, who you are, how you work as a person. You can actually just go to gallup.com, or you can actually purchase one of the Clifton Strengths books at any bookstore online. Make sure that it's one that includes the Clifton Strengths assessment, and you can take that, and it gives you some limited results from that. Um, but like I said, if you are registering, if you're coming to the WIN conference, you'll get one that is included in your registration. So thank you so much for
Yeah, the
that.
value add is just doing like a team building session, taking that information, not just taking it, know what your strengths are, but how it would be applicable. And if you're going to do it as a team, just sharing that information so that you work better together, understanding each other's strengths. So, yeah.
Yeah, how do we leverage each other's strengths as a team,
Yeah.
right? What do I bring? What do you bring? What can we truly accomplish together? What frustrates you? You know, like how do I really avoid frustrating you? How can we work best together? Those are the types of conversations and things that we learn as a team. And so, yeah, and I'm very excited about that. So if you have any other questions about that, you can always reach out to me directly. Okay, then the next question is a little long, but let me see what time we've got. We've got until 12:30 is our hard cut. Um, okay, we've got an anonymous attendee said this. One of the comments Tallman made resonated with me. The one about the fourth or fifth manager coming in, making a change without getting buy-in. Several people in my group have left because of the constant change that seemed to be change for the sake of change, so an executive could leave a legacy with little input or buy-in for those who have to implement it. How do we, as employees, navigate change that we do not agree with? Because the leader has not explained the reason for the decision. How should we communicate and frame our concerns? And the other concern is there the lack of resources to implement the change. So let's go ahead and start with that first question that they asked, which was, how do we as employees navigate change that we don't agree with? Because the leader has not explained the reason for the decision. So basically, hey, it's like, I'm not going to tell you why we're doing it, but this is what I want you to go do. Go do it. People do that.
Unfortunately, you've got a lot of managers that are very strong technically, but maybe not as strong from a management perspective. Haven't had a lot of training. Maybe their behavioral profile doesn't lend itself naturally to being integrated with the workforce itself. I'll give you a prime example. You're familiar with the Myers-Briggs type indicator?
Yes.
I mean, everybody, it's the oldest psychometric that there is. There are two ways of making a decision in the Myers-Briggs type indicator. One is a thinking way, which is a rational, analytical, impersonal style of decision making. And the other one is a feeling, which is a subjective, values-based decision making process where you actually put yourself in somebody else's shoes in the process of making that decision. The nuclear industry is profoundly logical, rational, and analytical. If you ask somebody who is T how they say I love you, they'll say, I said it at the beginning of the relationship. When it changes, I'll let you know. Other than that, it's hot, straight, and normal. Understand? I mean, that's just the impersonal nature of it's the impersonal nature. The feeler, however, wants to hear the three words. So what you've probably got here in this scenario is a logical, rational, analytical manager that is very entrepreneurial, wants to be here as the shortest period of time that he can and move up to the next level. He wants his people to do whatever he tells them to do. There's not going to be a lot of development. There's not going to be a lot of training. There's not going to be a lot of engagement. So this employee is right. And I have been in plenty of organizations where the attrition rate was out of sight just because of this. I was at one plant where if they lost one more SRO, they had to shut a unit down. And it was strictly because of attrition rates. My standard phrase is, it'd be nice for the employees to be able to talk to somebody I don't know who, it could be ECP, it could be whoever, to be able to discuss that with that supervisor. Remember, we talked about trust. If there's no trust established between the worker and the leader, then there's not going to be any conversation between the two of them because the employee is not going to know what's going to happen when they do that. Are they going to be blackballed? Are they going to be marked? Are they going to be fired? Whatever the case may be. So that this is a very tenuous scenario that has to happen. The other thing is a lot of times, and this happens frequently, they'll just wait them out. We're not going to do the change that they want. We're going to do absolute minimum, whatever they tell us to do, nothing additional. And they'll wait that individual out until he's moved up to wherever he needs to go. So it's a tough scenario. But the employees, even thinking employees, want to know that they're doing the right work. So for this manager, it's pretty simple to be able to sit down with the employee, figure out what the tasks are, and then start observing them to make sure that it's being done and reward them when it is. And when it isn't, teach them what they need to know to make it better. That's how you build all that organizational trust, which is required for a scenario like this one.
Yeah.
Make sense?
I would also
Yeah.
add, Tallman, the one other thing is ask for a 1/1. So you as employees of that group, let's say you're going through several manager changes, you can talk to their manager. So a lot of companies do that where you do a 1/1. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly, it could be biannually. But if you're seeing so many changes in short periods of time, that particular position, I've heard that before, is that particular position is for a rotational. They come in, get their stamp, and off they go, right? So it's a development opportunity for them. It doesn't matter if the company, that organization is doing well or not. But I would say, to your question about how should we communicate and frame our concerns, I think you as employees could request a 1/1, meaning having that conversation above that management level. So you can all walk in together and say, here's what's going on. Here's our organization. Is the change impacting your work or is the change? So you also need to know what the change is that they're making. So that's important. Does it change the direction of what your deliverables are? Does it change if you're a chemistry organization? Are they going to tell you to go be an operator? So I think that needs to be understood as well. But I would recommend ask for that 1/1, and you as a team need to walk in with some examples and how would you want to approach it and get their input on why these frequent changes are happening.
Yeah, you definitely have to be very careful. And again, it's the trust factor. Because even an employee talking to their direct supervisor, and I'm assuming that that's what this particular incident is. If you went over their head, that guy could come back and start chewing on this one, and then you could still have it downhill. I mean, that's a tough one.
You can go over their head as long as they know you're going over their head. I mean, I'm not saying do it in secret. It needs to be really, hey, we need to understand why we've had so many changes. I mean, there's
Yeah, absolutely. These crucial conversations need to be happening. And I think sometimes it's very challenging for employees to even know how to initiate those kinds of conversations. Hopefully, the manager that they're working with is really open to having these conversations, but even if they're not, do your very best. Even send an email, do whatever you can to ask those questions so that you can get in alignment. Because when you don't have buy-in and you're doing things out of I have to, that obligation, it just never feels good. It never feels good at all. So we have just a couple more minutes really before we have to close out this webinar, but I'm going to try to just ask a portion of this question. It says from FPL Next Era. From your experience, what specifically has to change in how leaders and teams behave day to day for a change to stick?
Who's this one for?
Either, either one of you. But we probably have time for just one short answer.
Well, quite frankly, I'm not too familiar with FPL. It's been well over 20 years since I've had anything to do with them. So I'm not real sure where they're at this point in time.
Yeah, I think, some of the things is when you see teams um working together and, from your for the change to stick, really, I mean, if you understand what your organization's mission is and if you have KPIs that you're starting to see movement, and I'm just kind of reading this question again. What's the earliest
Yeah,
signal
me
that
too.
tells you it's actually taking hold? It's, I think, when people are starting to work together and there isn't any, I don't know what the culture is. If you're seeing a change in culture, perhaps, maybe send me a note, Alicia, and we can check it out and maybe have a chat about it.
Excellent. I love that, John C, that you've actually put yourself out there. Can they really like email you if they happen to have a
Absolutely.
question? Okay, excellent.
Absolutely.
So before we get off this webinar, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put John C's email address. She has so kindly offered her email address for anybody who has any pressing questions that we didn't get to today. I will also put in my email address if you happen to have any questions about the strengths or the professional development workshop that I'm hosting at Win. Please email me anytime. We are excited to help you navigate change, lead change, be a part of the change. And now I'm going to turn it right back over to Gabby.
Thanks. That was some awesome talk about change management. I think we can all take away some amazing things from this session that we've had. So I just wanted to thank you all for attending our Professional Development Committee webinar. I'd like to thank our speakers, John C. and Tallman, and of course Ming Ming for helping me conduct this webinar effectively and have some fun while we're doing it. And I would also like to thank our host, Caitlin Mercola, and my co-lead, Julie Yaki, who'd been helping throughout this entire session, and both Ming Ming and I. And I just wanted to also reiterate that this webinar recording will be uploaded to the US Win YouTube channel as well as the US Win PD library. Our committee looks forward to delivering content at the WIN conference in August, as Ming Ming was also saying. So the Save the Date announcement was posted on the US WIN website. They have the dates on there already. So keep an eye out for registration links, any sort of thing to get you to be able to attend this conference. We would love to have you. So we hope you all can attend. And thank you so much for attending our session today. So thank you.
Thank you.